What I am about to tell you is going to be hard to believe, but I really need to get it off of my chest. I want out, but there is no way out for me in my situation, not without serious consequences. So I'm typing this here anonymously to tell you what I experienced. I worked as a security guard of sorts, and I have done for many years. I have worked security for many high-profile events over the years, and for some very wealthy clientele. It didn't always start out that way. I first worked for this company, and to me, it was just a regular security company. They had a few in-house staff members, usually the higher-ups running the show, the supervisors and the like. But as for actual security guard staff, most of the company was supplemented with subcontractors supplied by other companies that they would then vet. I was eventually hired by the security company directly, but it took many years and the building of a lot of trust. You would work the lowest of the low, most ordinary jobs. And the staff, they would test you, prod your mind to see what type of person that you are. If you would follow things without question, if you would kick up a fuss about things, or take the pay and just move on. Then you would be moved up. You would have to do more to earn more trust. Even when I was hired by this company, I still was not trusted with the better, higher paying events. I had to prove myself by doing things I found uncomfortable, to say the least. I had to do initiations to prove I was not afraid of being uncomfortable or humiliated, and that I would do what I was supposed to do. Now, although we were hired for security, most of the time, security was not strictly necessary, for the richer clients at the very least. In that case, you become more of a servant, I guess, is the only way I can really put it. You do as you are told, anything, no matter how strange. The first job I ever did was actually accompanying a client to a social event in a public place. I remember having to wait outside a closet in a random upstairs section of the building while the client was in the closet with a woman half their age. I had to look out for other people and divert them, cause a distraction, and lie to his wife and keep her occupied. That was one of the more tame things I experienced. Once I was more embedded in the company, one of the clients asked me to undergo an initiation before working for him further. I guess the aim was to prove that I was trustworthy and that I would never put myself above the client, no matter the circumstances. I was blindfolded for the most of it. I was taken out into an isolated cornfield where there was no one around for miles and miles. I had to strip down to just my underwear and fight someone else, bare knuckles, who was also being initiated. I got my ass beat, and I was bleeding from almost everywhere on my body. The rules were that you only win once the opponent physically cannot stand anymore. And for my punishment, the loser, which was me, was to be erected in that field like they were a scarecrow in nothing but their underwear. They left someone behind to watch over me and to give me water, but I had to hang there for multiple days. I felt like trash. I could feel the bruises on my body, physically throbbing. I had no idea how I was supposed to build trust, but I went through all of it without question. There was more beyond that, but this is already going to be much too long. You might ask, why do all of this crazy shit in the first place? Well, the answer is money. That and the fact that once you're doing these jobs, it's hard to get out. I grew up dirt poor. My parents raised me in a mobile home, and we barely even had money for the gas to power the thing. Food stamps only went so far, and I recall going multiple days hungry sometimes, and that was as a 6-year-old child. Growing up like that, it really changes your perspective on these things. You will do anything to survive. For me, keeping my pride was not worth life-changing money, and money that would ensure I actually got a chance at life. It was better to throw my pride away. And the things I was asked to do, well, at first they weren't so bad. Most of them were self-sacrifice. I told myself it was okay, because it was only me taking the hits and suffering. But this event I am going to tell you about, it was the first step down a road of shame that I will never be able to live with. There was a party being hosted by the client who I did the initiation for. He asked for me personally by name. At the time, I thought it was good news, but it really wasn't. I was to be present while he gave a speech to some people, and he also wanted me to help with a show that he wanted to put on. That's all he said. He didn't really give me anything more to go on than a show. He wanted me to be a personal witness and to help take part in something greater. I agreed, but only because he was offering to pay me an obscene amount of money. He only wanted people he completely trusted at this event, and I suppose after going on many years of work, I was one of those people. I was flown out to New York for this, all expenses paid. There was a big manor home upstate that had been prepared especially for this event. I arrived long before any guests did, and I had to help prepare things. There were staff there, but not a lot of them, and I think everyone was a security guard. And like I said, when I say I was a security guard, that was mostly just a job title. I was whatever people wanted me to be. I helped to prepare tables, specifically this very large dining table that had a white cloth draped over it. Lots of ornaments and decorations and that kind of thing. I asked if I was needed to help prepare any food or ingredients for the cooks arriving later, but I was told no. I was told that the food they wanted was specific and would have to be prepared in the moment. I just thought, sure, whatever. I'm sure they had some fancy-ass dish in mind that I'd never heard of. After that, I spent a lot of hours standing outside and waiting in boredom. Just before the sun started to set, a vehicle arrived, but it wasn't a guest. It was a few people in suits. I had no idea that they would be arriving. I walked over to check out their IDs and inquire what the hell was going on, and they told me that they had some deliveries for the occasion. I told them the best place to park around back, right next to an entrance that led directly into the basement of the place. The car they arrived in, it was more of a truck or a van, with storage in the back. I helped them move these crates inside, which were so heavy, I had no idea what was inside of them. I also moved a few barrels full to the brim of things, and then I was asked to help move something else and to be extra careful. It was something that was strapped to one of those metal things with wheels to help move items. The thing with wheels, it was quite long, and so was the item. It was covered with multiple layers of tarp that were not strapped down. They'd just been placed over it. I didn't even ask. That was a hard rule. I'd made that mistake before and been punished for it, and I knew not to get it wrong ever again. So I kept my curiosity to myself. I helped the guy in the suit carry it down from the vehicle, and then helped him wheel it down into the basement. It was about to become dark, and my job was done, at least for now. It wasn't long before the guests started arriving. All of them were dressed up in incredibly fancy clothes. There were rules of engagement for me. I was not even allowed to so much as look in the direction of a guest unless I was summoned. I had to carry out anything that they asked me. Of course, I couldn't make myself blind, so I still caught things here and there. Some of the people there, they turned up in these half-mask things. They only covered the top half of the face and left the entire lower half, like the mouth, completely free. They also had holes for the eyes. These were only worn by a few people though, not very many. Most just wore nothing on their faces. I barely recognized most of the people anyway. They were all obviously wealthy, but ghosts to ordinary people. The night went on for a while. In one of the other rooms, a makeshift stage had been prepared for my client to stand on. He gave a really long speech in a language that was not English. I don't even know what language it was. It wasn't a language I'd ever personally heard spoken out loud before. After the speech came the entertainment. Unfortunately for me, I was part of this entertainment, and I had no choice. The client asked me to come up to the front of the room and step onto the stage, which I obliged. He told everyone in the room that I was to be the appetizer, to get people excited and warmed up are the exact words that he used, that I would be a fun game for them before the main event. The fear and panic I felt when he finished saying these words, it just took over me completely, but I had no choice in the matter. Most of that night, well, I spent it disassociating, pretending to be somewhere else. Sometimes it's the only way to get through. The client, he stripped me down to just my underwear so that all of my skin was on display. He pulled out a small flip knife from out of his pocket and he handed it to me. He told me that I had to make the first cut, otherwise it wouldn't be right. There were a million thoughts running through my mind. I definitely thought about stabbing him and running away a couple of times. It's something I would only ever think though. I was way too scared for my life to act. I unfolded the knife and brought it to my palm. I could see that I was shaking. My hands were just rattling back and forth. And when I brought it up to my palm, the client just shook his head and told me, no. So I moved it down to my forearm, and he told me no again. I moved it to a different place, just underneath my nipples, and he told me, perfect. And I made a cut. Not a deep one, just enough that a tiny trickle of blood appeared, just a dot. He took his finger and wiped it from me and tasted it. The entire room at this point, they were laughing and giggling to each other, shouting things at me that I can't really remember, like a heckler would at a comedy club. He invited various people onto the stage. I was asked to make bigger and bigger cuts in different places, and these people, they would taste the blood. Most of this was just a blur for me. Like I said, I tried to block it out. The only time I would snap back and become aware was when I was asked a question for which I was forced to answer. This older lady, she tapped me on the shoulder and ran her finger across my forehead with my own blood. And she looked at me. She looked at me for a long while. She stared me dead in the eyes and she said, "Do you want to see?" I hadn't ever been asked a question like that before, a question where I didn't really even know how to answer. So I just nodded very meekly and tried to stop paying attention once again. She tasted some of my blood and she took something out of her mouth. I was half expecting them to be dentures or something and that she had maybe lost her teeth, but no. They were on her teeth, tooth caps or something, I don't know what they were. But when she took them off, I could see her teeth, her real teeth. Big teeth, sharp ones, unnatural. They didn't even fit inside her mouth properly. I tried my very hardest to stop paying attention right then and there, but I couldn't. Now that I had seen, now that I had taken notice, I couldn't get my brain to just stop thinking and look away. She removed something from her eyes too. Contact lenses, I think, but they must have been big ones, because I saw that her actual eye color was not an impossibly bright green anymore. They were a golden, sharp yellow kind of color. The whites of her eyes were barely even white. They were also tinted this sickly kind of yellow. It was insane. She asked me if I wanted to see the rest, is what she said, and she caressed my face as she said it. I just nodded again because I didn't know what else to do. I could feel my body just shaking again. I could feel my heart beating so fast. My heart, it felt like it was twice as heavy as before. It felt like it was just going to drop out of my body and hit the floor. So I nodded again, and when I nodded yes to this question, the rest of the room started laughing. She started laughing too, and she told me that if I was lucky and made the right moves, that perhaps she would hire me to come and work for her. After that, everyone in the room just dispersed. They left the room with the staging. It was apparently time for the main event, and that they had had enough of me. My client, he told me not to worry, that I would not be part of anything else tonight, and that I would just be a spectator. He told me that he only had one more task for me, and that I would be getting a big pay rise after tonight. I was told to head down to the basement in order to help bring the entertainment. I could feel nothing but dread by this point. I didn't want to know what the entertainment was. If I was the appetizer, what was the main event? Those people in black suits, the guy I helped, he was still around. He brought me down to the basement with him, and we moved the crates and the thing underneath the tarp all the way up to the dining hall. It took a while because everything was so heavy. The client had prepared another speech and was talking about eating soon. There still were not any cooks or any waitstaff here, so it seemed really strange. I thought they would have arrived by now, but there was no sign of any cars or vans pulling up. The dining table was already set up, but it looked like they would be waiting for a while if they were waiting for some food to be cooked from scratch. After that, the client cracked open one of the crates and pulled some things out. These cups or wine glass type things that I think were ceramic. They looked incredibly expensive. There were other things in there too, but I wasn't really paying full attention. The client asked me to walk over to the tarp and take it off, and then to place the entertainment on top of the table. I had a bad gut feeling, but I prayed with every fiber of my being that it was not true. But when I took off the multiple tarps, finally, I had to bite down hard on my lip until it bled to hide my shock. If I had reacted in the wrong way, then I know that I would have been in trouble. Because there was a man. He was alive, he was just unconscious. It was at this moment I knew I had to go into self-preservation mode. I did not want to go through with any of this, but I knew if I didn't, then I would probably end up dead, or worse. The client told me that he was just sleeping, and he told me to wake him up. I said that I would go and fetch some water, and that would do the job, but the client told me no. He handed me something wooden. It was like a ping pong paddle or something, and he told me to use that to wake him up. And so I did. With the first strike, his body jolted slightly, which I think was just reflex, and the client told me to use more force. When I did, the man shot awake, and he was immediately in a panic. He punched me, started trying to wrestle me, and started trying to break out of the room, but the man in the suit who brought him here caught him at the door and stopped him. The client told me to retrieve and restrain him. He told me that the client had to stay awake to make sure that I didn't use too much force and spoil him or knock him out. I had to grab him in a headlock from behind, and when I did, I took my chance to whisper in his ear. I told him that I was sorry and that I had no choice, not that my apology was really worth anything. It took a while, but we eventually tied the man by his legs and arms and placed him down on top of the table, along with putting a ball gag in his mouth so he could not scream. These next events, they went on for some hours, and a lot of it is a blur in my mind because I was trying not to see anything at all. I wanted so desperately to just disappear for good, for the ground to open up, and for me to be taken to hell where I belong. The clients, they spent hours biting into this man. They all had these horribly long and sharp teeth that were so unnatural, just like the old lady. I saw them perform almost like a ritual on this man. They would start in a pattern, they would do it a certain way. They would start with small bites, just to release a tiny little bit of blood. They didn't go all in right away, but eventually the bites, they would start to get bigger and bolder, but it was slowly built up. It took hours for them to be fully biting down. I only looked at this man in the face once or twice. Whenever I did, he was staring right at me, right into my soul. He always had tears in his eyes and was trying to squirm in pain, but the ropes were stopping that. I remember hearing the muffled cries every so often. I remember at one point, one of the guests brought their teeth down into his arm, and they proceeded to cut the arm open. They just kept bringing up bigger and bigger layers of his skin until his arm was all bloody and everything underneath was just exposed. there was no top layer of skin there anymore. There is another big gap in my memory at this point, but I wish I didn't remember this next part either. One of the man's arms, it looked shrunken and withered. It was so small and shriveled up and malnourished when it was just fine just a few hours before. I don't know exactly what they did, but I don't really want to know. It looked like all of the moisture had been sucked out of it. Everything had been sucked out of it, except for the bone. And I remember this one image in my mind that I can't get rid of, no matter how hard I try. I see it when I go to bed at night. It just keeps me awake. I saw this older man. He circled the table for a while and then climbed on top of it. It was the first time someone had done this. He was behind the man, kneeling on the table just behind his head. And I saw him bring his face lower and lower towards the man's head until he was hovering just inches away. I could see those teeth peeking outwards, dripping with blood. And with this speed that my brain could not even comprehend, he just brought one down and sunk it in. He sunk his teeth directly into the man's eyeball. I saw it go right through the center, and it made this sickly noise, this wet squelching noise. The man on the table, his face was a ghostly white at this point, and I think when this happened, when the tooth pierced his eyeball, I think he just went limp. I think that was the point that he died, that his body just couldn't take the pain anymore, or maybe it pierced so deeply it just killed him, because his face and his eyes, they contorted into this expression of horrible anguish and just, they never moved again. He didn't so much as twitch his eyes. I remember that they took the gag off of the man, and he did not make a sound. They untied him, and he did not so much as twitch, and I don't remember anything again for another long while. Not until there was a tarp over the table, and the client was asking me to move it back down to the basement. And the man in the suit, he drove it away in the vehicle. To where? I don't really know. I knew I was in deep shit before this point, but this was the first time I really figured out the true nature of some of the people that I was working for. All of the guests left. I and a few other members of staff were left to clean up the room. The dining table sheet was covered in blood. I think there were even bits of dried puke that must have leaked out from the mouth of the man strapped down, just trickled through the gaps of the gag. After this, the client grabbed me by the shoulder and brought me into a room upstairs without even saying a word to me. He sat me down in a chair and began to talk to me. Well, at me, really. It wasn't a two-way conversation. He told me that he knew that this was new to me, that everything I experienced before now was not on the same level as this. He went on and on for quite some time, and I don't really remember half of the words he said to me. I didn't even really feel like I was in my body anymore. When I see the memories inside my head, when I think about what happened, it's like I'm floating above the room and just watching a complete stranger. I got the gist of what he was saying though. There were some pretty obvious implications. Mainly that I was an accessory to a crime, and that if any type of information was ever leaked, then I would be the one taking the fall for all of the events that took place. I was told that my money would be rescinded, that I would spend most of my life in prison, and that my life would not be worth living. I was told to nod if I understood. I did so. I am an evil monster. I know that. I regret all of the things that I did. At first, when it was just myself suffering, I told myself that it was okay, that no one was being hurt but me, so that was fine, that everything was just going to be fine. I was scared as hell at the start of that night, but I told myself I would get through it. After that, I just locked up and retreated away into my own head. But I can't do it anymore. I could not do this shit anymore. I hate myself, and I am done. I am finally going to do what I should have done originally. I am going to flee the country and live in the middle of nowhere somewhere. Even if I don't survive, it has to be better than this. I was around 14 years old when these events happened to me. I was visiting my grandparents in southern Illinois just for the summer. I had 3 friends down there with me. They were 12, and 13 years old. It was probably just after lunch, about 12 o'clock-ish. We were walking down these decommissioned railroad tracks. The trees make a tunnel out of the old rotted tracks. There's trees on either sides, just covering everything. We were just goofing off and playing like boys. We got a good ways away from the house. And after a while of walking on these tracks, I start hearing these sounds. They sound like radio static. I ignore it because I don't know what it is. I think it's my mind maybe just playing tricks on me, so I just keep on playing with my friends. The sound stays with us, getting neither louder or quieter, and it's not just me who can hear it anymore. Every single one of my friends says that they can hear it too. We all talk amongst ourselves about what it could be, and we figure maybe it's some older kids screwing with us. We keep on walking. We must have been walking around 30 minutes before this next point. The static stayed around that whole way, but that's all it was. And then after 30 minutes, we get to this railroad bridge. It spans a decent-sized gully. There is sand at the bottom. It looks like dirt bikes are ridden there a lot, and people use it for off-roading. It looks like a popular teen hangout. But right now, it's completely deserted. There are no older kids around. The static, it starts getting louder once we got to this place. One of my other friends, he just starts crying. The rest of us get really nervous. I'm like, okay guys, let's go. We are following the gully, down the left that leads to the main road. We start walking down the bank to hit the main road. I'm about 2 blocks away from my grandparents' house by now, so we will be home really soon, and we won't have to hear that static sound anymore. I am still just walking, and all of a sudden, I look up in the sky and it's just pitch black. It's fully dark, nighttime. I am getting closer to the driveway, and I am freaking out, wondering what is going on. There are 3 police cars waiting there for me. All 3 of my friends' parents' cars too. We walk down the driveway. Everyone rushes out to us. They ask where we've been. I'm like, what do you mean? They tell me it's 4:46 a.m. We tell them exactly what happened, but no one believes us. We get grounded, and we are forced to go home the very next day. I have absolutely no idea what happened from approximately 12:30 p.m. to 4:46 a.m. It was probably around 2018 when this happened to me. I was camping with my girlfriend and some of her friends. My GF's friends are these urbanite normies who are terrified of nature. They also really hate guns. I am on this trip because they want someone to make them feel safe, but at the same time, I catch shit from them because I packed 2 firearms, a double barrel, Merkel side-by-side, and a regular hunting rifle, a Mossberg I believe. I have borrowed that one from my stepfather. We are going to spend about 4 days in the woods in the Daniel Boone National Forest. On the first day that we arrive, we set up the tents. I continue to explain why I brought 2 guns with us, which my explanation was a lie. I actually had forgotten the shotgun was in the trunk at the time. I had intended to simply bring the hunting rifle, but luck would have it, I had ammo for the shotgun on me at the time. It's going pretty smooth. We are having fun down by the Cave Run Lake, when I notice what looks like some movement in the tree line a ways away. It looks kind of like a large dog's head, but I pay no mind to it, thinking someone is walking their dog around that particular area. We head back to where we had our tent set up and get dinner ready, start a fire, the usual camping experience. Around 11 to 12 is when I get up, having to go and take a piss. I head off into the woods with one of the guns and a lantern, a battery-operated one specifically, to go and pee. I am finishing up when I start noticing these noises of something rustling around the brush. I start to notice these bright yellow lights not too long afterwards. Oh shit, it's eyeshine. These bright yellow eyes are shining, and they are about 6 feet or so off of the ground. I shine the lantern in the direction of the eyes, and I see this large, canine-like head standing upright. I wish I could say I shot at the thing, but I did the pussy thing, and I bolted the other way. I did fire off a shot when I got back into camp, but that's all. I lied to the GF and her friends. I said I got spooked by some animal. Nothing of interest happened afterwards, but I did catch some glimpses of the thing.